Hey everyone, and welcome to the Twiglore channel. Today we're going to be talking about axe safety. On this episode we're going to be talking about axe safety, and specifically we're going to be talking about the axes that we use most often in bushcraft and green woodworking. These axes tend to be quite short, and it's a truth in the world of axes that the shorter the axe, the more dangerous the axe. The reason for that is that a long axe, when you swing it, tends to hit the ground before it hits you. But these short axes, when we swing them, if we miss whatever it is we're swinging at, they're headed straight for us. And that makes them a bit more dangerous, but it also means that we need to use some very specific techniques with these axes to make sure that we use them safely. These axes are very versatile, and we expect a lot of our tiny little axes, but they can do a lot if you know how to use them. In order to do that, we probably need to head outside. So let's go. The first rule of axe safety applies to every sharp edge tool that we carry. It could be your carving knife, a folding saw, but it's particularly important with the axe, and that is that the tool stays in the sheath until right before you're ready to make a cut. Once you're finished using the tool, it needs to go right back in its sheath. That means keeping track of the sheath. It's so easy to take the sheath off, set it on the ground, and never be able to find it again because it's brown and it looks like every single other thing on the ground. So keep track of your sheath. I usually stick mine in my pocket, and that way I know exactly where it is when it's time to put it back in its sheath again. Also, we never use an axe when it's dark or when we're tired. And that doesn't just mean when you're sleepy. That means if you've been using the axe for a while and your arm starts to get tired, it's time to put the axe down and take a break for a little while. Walk around, do something else. You should never be in a hurry when you're using a sharp edge tool like this. So take your time, and if you get tired, take a break. One of the important things to understand about these short axes is that swinging them is the most dangerous way to use them. That doesn't mean we're not going to swing them, we are, but we want to avoid swinging them as often as we can. So if there's a way to do the work that we want to do without swinging this tool, we're going to do it that way. So instead of swinging the axe, we're actually going to drive the axe with a wooden mallet. This almost completely reduces the possibility of us missing the workpiece because we're just going to set it gently on top of what we want to split. Now we need to think about where we are in relation to the axe so that we stay safe when we drive this through. To drive it through, we're going to use a mallet like this one. These axes are not designed to be hit with another piece of metal like a sledgehammer. You can actually deform the hole that the handle is going through, and the handle will loosen up very quickly if you hit it with a metal hammer. So always use something made out of wood. This is a pretty big wooden mallet. I have different sizes of mallets to do different things. Here's a fairly small one right here. And I have a video, see the link above, to show you how to make mallets like this. So before we drive this through, we want to make sure that we've put in place two different safeties. One is that the log we're trying to split needs to be at the far side of the stump. If it's back here and the axe goes through, it's now coming towards us. Instead, we want it as far away from us as we can comfortably get so that when it comes through, it's landing in our stump. The second thing that we want to make sure of is that we're not in the path of the axe or the mallet. So if I swing it like this, it's coming straight at me. Instead, I want to swing it like this so that it's going past me, and I want the axe to come past me on the other side. So I'm going to make a shallow V like this with my axe and my mallet, and I'm going to stand in between them, just like this. So now when I bring the mallet down on the back of the axe, like that, if I miss, the mallet goes past me. If the axe swings through my log that I'm trying to split, it also goes past me on the other side. When you split, you need to drive it hard at first, and you'll see it bite into the log, just like this. You can probably see it starting to split already. It'll probably take, for a log this size, it'll take a few hits, just keep driving it. There it goes. Another way to split a log is by swinging the axe. If we're going to swing the axe, we need to make sure that when we do, the blade of the axe is going to land squarely in the stump. Now if I stand up to swing this, when I swing it, if I miss, it's coming right back towards me. And that's exactly what I don't want. So instead, what we're going to do with these short axes is we're going to kneel down. Now when I swing the axe, if I miss, it's going straight into the stump. So we've changed the position of our body to make this axe act like it has a longer handle. All we have to do is get low. Whenever you swing the axe, get low. Before we swing, we want to put one more safety in place, and that is to again put the piece we're trying to split towards the back of our stump. So we want it far away from us so we have as much stump between us and the axe head as we can get. Now, we're going to bring the axe down. Again, if we miss, we're going to land in the log. When we bring the axe down, the shape of the axe head is what's going to do the work of splitting that log. But you can see how thin these axes are, and they only start to widen out once we get towards the handle. So we need to drive this in fairly deeply to get a good split. So we're going to bring the axe up with both hands. I've got one hand on the swell and one hand above it. When I bring the axe down, I want to aim for the center of what I want to split. When you swing the axe, you're always going to be looking at what you want to hit. You don't need to look at the axe head at all. You want to look at what you want to hit. Bring the axe up, bring it down. And that split quite nicely. There it went. So, when the piece gets this small, it can be very difficult to accurately swing the axe and have it land where you want it to land. So if you can use a mallet, use the mallet. It's often one of the first tools that I make when I go out into the woods if I'm going to stay for any length of time. I just make a simple mallet like this one, and then I can drive my axe accurately to split smaller pieces. So I realized yesterday that I completely forgot to film one very important technique for splitting small stock while swinging the axe. So I thought I would come back today and pick it up and incorporate it into this axe safety video, because it's one of the safest ways to swing an axe, and it's also one of the most accurate ways, especially when you're splitting smaller pieces. Now this technique doesn't work very well with larger pieces, because what you're going to do is actually lift both the axe and the piece you want to split at the same time and bring them down onto your block simultaneously. To do that, you're going to put your hand underneath the piece that you want to split and your thumb on top of the axe handle. And this is with your off hand. With your other hand, you're going to put it on the back, the bottom of the handle of the axe. You're going to lift both together and bring them down onto the block. The other important thing about this technique is that you want to have about half the blade sitting on the piece that you want to split. Because you have to hold the piece you want to split and your axe handle in one hand, this technique is limited to pretty small pieces of wood. But it's so safe and accurate that you can actually use this technique to split wood down to very small sizes. And this becomes important if you're trying to do something like make kindling, especially when it's wet out. You need to make dry, small pieces of wood to start a fire. This is the technique that I use. Here's how it works. Once you have the grip with your thumb over the top and your other hand on the back of the handle, you're going to lift both pieces up at the same time and bring them down together, like that. So now we've split the piece of wood. We can push the axe handle sideways. I'm actually going to push the back of the handle in this direction and hold the workpiece still, and when I do, the axe head actually pries the piece apart. We can continue on with this technique and make ever smaller pieces of wood. You can even split wood down to toothpick size if you want to get carried away with it. But with this technique, you can still swing the axe while being almost perfectly accurate and very safe. We're still working towards the back, towards the far side of our chopping block with this technique. This technique takes some practice to get used to, but once you do get used to it, you'll find all sorts of ways to use it to break down larger pieces into smaller pieces efficiently and safely. So now we're going to use the axe to do a little bit of carving. And if we're going to use the axe as a carving tool, we're going to be swinging it. There's some very specific things you need to remember if you're going to swing the axe, especially if you're carving something, because now you're going to be holding the workpiece in your offhand. Now that we've split the workpiece down to a usable size, we're going to use the axe in a different way. Now we're actually going to choke up on the handle. That means put our hand closer to the head of the axe. And that changes the way the axe feels in the hand because it changes the balance of the axe. The higher you put your hand, the lighter the axe will feel in your hand, but also the less wood it will take at a time. So if you want to make very light, delicate cuts, you want your hand up quite high, all the way underneath the beard of the axe here, if you're making the lightest cuts. You can even take your finger, your index finger, your pointer finger, and lay it on the side of the axe blade. I do this all the time to give me a little bit more control over the blade of the axe. But putting your hand up here is a good starting point. Now when we swing the axe to do more delicate work, the axe is always going to go straight up and down, never at an angle. You can see what will happen if I swing this axe at my workpiece at an angle, and the workpiece will actually be coming towards me, and so will the head of the axe. So the axe head is going to go straight up and down. In order to change the effect that that has on the workpiece, we're actually going to change the angle of the workpiece instead of the angle at which we swing. If we want to actually make a series of nicks in the workpiece to weaken the fibers, I'm going to lower the angle of the workpiece. I'm going to hold the workpiece at the very top, and I'm going to cradle it in my hands. You want to keep from having your thumb over the front of your workpiece or your fingers, and that's for pretty obvious reasons, but anytime we can put the wood between ourselves and the blade of the axe, we do that. So we're going to cradle it in our hand like this, lower the angle, and just put a series of nicks in the workpiece. Now I'm just dropping the axe into the wood. You want to use your wrist. If your arm is stiff like this, your swing is very inefficient and you're going to get really tired out. Instead, you want to start with the handle pointing down towards the ground, your hand loosely on the axe handle, and then you want to effectively throw the head of the axe into the workpiece. Whenever you swing an axe, you want to be off to the side of the axe head. So if the axe head were to accidentally, oh, that's a good one, accidentally. If the axe head were to accidentally miss the workpiece and not hit the stump, it's still swinging past my body. Now, we've made our series of nicks. Now I'm going to lift the workpiece up at a steeper angle, and I'm going to start at the top nick, and I'm just going to let the axe slide down. That'll allow it to easily take off the wood that we put nicks in before because the fibers are so weak from where we put the nicks in. So now we can do another series of nicks, like that. Tip the workpiece up, start at the top nick, and work our way down, removing material efficiently. The next thing you need to remember is that whenever you're working on a piece that you're holding in your offhand, you never want to work more than just past halfway up the workpiece. So if this is halfway up, I want to work just slightly higher than that and no more. Certainly not more than 2/3 of the way up, where you have only 1/3 of the workpiece left. That brings the axe head too close to your hand. So instead, work up to halfway, just a little bit more, and then you're going to turn the workpiece over. Do your series of nicks, and then take the nicks off. Off they go. So now you can see that we're starting to generate a good flat surface on this workpiece that we can use as a good reference for when we're carving a spoon or a butter knife or a spatula or something like that. Once you get used to swinging the axe, you'll find that you can take off wood very efficiently, or you can do very delicate work with the axe and take off very little wood, but in a controlled manner. It's very safe to swing the axe as long as you remember to keep the workpiece on a stump, the swing of the axe away from your body, and to always have the axe swinging up and down. You never want to swing the axe hard when we're holding the workpiece in our hand. There's no reason to have your hand way down here on the handle. Choke up on that axe handle. Get in close to your work so you can see what you're doing and start carving. As the stump or laid down log that you're working on starts to fill up with chips, take a second to put your workpiece off to the side and just sweep it off. I can't tell you how many times I've had my workpiece on one of those chips and it slips out from underneath me, and you don't want that happening. So take a second and just sweep your stump off and then start again. And the last thing to remember with regards to axe safety is to keep your axe sharp. It's often said that a sharp tool is safer than a dull tool. I'm not so sure about that. I think that dull tools and sharp tools are all very dangerous. But it is true that a sharp tool, especially with an axe, gives you more control and more predictability over what that axe is going to do when it hits the wood. A dull axe will often blow off, and here's what a blow off looks like. When I bring the axe head down, I'm going to intentionally bring it down with the workpiece too steep, and you can watch what happens. And you can see the axe glances off the workpiece and lands in the stump. Now the more dull the axe edge is, the more likely it is that you're going to get those blow-offs. So keep your axe sharp and it will predictably bite in to the wood. One final note about axe safety, and this one has more to do with the safety of your axe, and specifically the safety of the edge of your axe. For this entire film, we've been working on this stump. It's very important that you never let the axe blade hit anything other than wood. We talked about not striking the back of the axe with anything other than wood, but that also applies to the edge. So you need to work on a stump like this one. Something heavy and large is preferable. A downed log also works well, but you want to make sure that the edge of the axe never comes in contact with the ground. The ground is full of rocks and pebbles that will chip and dull the edge instantly. So always work on a stump like this one, or when you can't find a stump like this, a downed log will do as well. All right, that's it for this episode. I hope you liked the video. If you did, hit that like button, climb up on your bed, jump off, land on the subscribe button, and we'll see you in the next one.